Right, here we go. So in the community update this time, I do want to give a highlight of three things. One, a quick review of where we've come or how far we've come with the 2022 community objectives. That's the first thing. And then two, on of reference, call out two items that have come up as a result of the 2022 community objectives. So why don't we start there? Sorry, let's see if I can get this to move. There we go. Just as a reminder for everyone, at the beginning of the year, we spent some time with the Community Council to try and find a focus for our work for this year. And this, we identified three things. One goal was to transition away from funded development to open source development. And there are a number of issues that have come up. Then I'll highlight a few of them, at least two of them this morning. We identified the plan for transitioning to module vNext, or figure out a plan for vNext. And we've seen some work in incentive and recognition. A lot of that you've seen over the last two PIs, where we now have quarterly metrics. We're able to acknowledge and reward those people in our community who have been active. As a reminder, this happens at the very last session on day 3. That will be Thursday, so do stick around for that. And I want to focus on the first two. So in terms of transitioning from funded development to open source, one of the discussions that we sat down with the Community Council and throughout the year, and we've having conversations, one of the ideas that has come up, that has come around, and sort of in some ways united the two highlighted points on the screen there, is the idea of a stable modular core. What does a stable modular core look like? One of the ideas that was proposed, and one of the things that the community feels is a key milestone, is being able to define and implement a stable modular core. And it is at that point that then we can go ahead and execute transition to transition away from funded development. So the argument that's being made is that let's try and find some resources and put in some work to get stable modular core. So what does this look like? These are a couple of ideas and a rough plan as defined through the Community Council and a number of other conversations we've had with community members and within the foundation internally. One of the critical pieces is one of the ideas that was mooted by the Community Council was the idea that a stable version of the modular core, by definition, should include the vNext reference architecture model. You will hear Pedro speak about that and show some demos. I believe it is in the next session. So stay tuned for that after the break. This is not the only requirement for what should be included in the stable modular core definition. There are a couple of others, but this is one of the most significant items that was highlighted and the points that came out in the various conversations we had with in the Community Council and within the foundation. In terms of a plan, this definition essentially of the stable modular core should lead to a product roadmap. And some of the items highlighted in the product roadmap, what are essential features, what aren't essential features, what are critical fixes that we need to fix immediately. And each of the features that we're building should ideally have some minimal business case justification. These are some of the points that were raised through the Community Council. Another goal is from the product roadmap, the design authority would then take the product roadmap and develop a technical roadmap, which then between the definition, the product roadmap and the technical roadmap, we should have a fairly clear understanding of the direction we're going in as a community. And once that would help us also figure out the path to building a stable modular core. Now, this has also necessitated some thinking in terms of the community evolution. And I'd like to share with you the current thinking my current thinking on how the work streams may evolve. And this is a proposal, and we open any discussions to the community if there are alternative proposals or suggestions to this model. Currently, and I'm going to focus on just one aspect of our community, which is the workstream process. Currently, when we talk about the work streams, any of the work streams that you see we're engaged in falls into one of four categories. We've got work streams that are part of the core clearing system. We've got core clearing system extensions. We've got supporting work streams. For example, the module training program is considered a supporting work stream. We've got ecosystem work streams. These are often work streams from vendors or people who are building tools that are intended to work with Moodle. For those of you unfamiliar with work streams, a lot of the sessions that we have proposed in the agenda for today, tomorrow, and Thursday fit into the work stream structure. Most of those topics are in and of themselves sometimes its own work stream. And as you hear the speakers present on them, you'll get a better sense of what work they do and what has been done in the last PI. In the new work streams, in considering the idea that the new work stream, that the stable modular core should include a reference architecture model, then we propose that the new work streams be scoped out into three categories. One, we've got bounded context work streams, we've got cross-bounded context work streams, and we've got module loop extension work streams. These terms will be familiar, and I'll ask Pedro to just give them highlights in his next session, just so you can pay attention to that. And you've got an idea of how we have perpetual work streams where the work is done every single PI, and there is a strong commitment towards open source development in line with our objective to transition away from funded development. This said, I want to pass it over to Paul Makin to give a little bit of insight into the process and the work that will go into the definition of the product perspective for the definition of this a stable modular core and related work. So I'll stop sharing my screen. Paul, I'll pass it over to you now.
Thank you, Simeon. Let me just find my slide deck. Right, I think that's it. Hello, everyone. Very pleased to see you all today. I'm not planning to give much of an update on the work streams overall. Simeon asked me to just talk about stability of the core, and I'm going to give you a brief update from my perspective. As a product side, this is my focus on the components of the modular ecosystem. As you can see, it comprises the hub with all of the various functional elements within the hub, the settlement partners, payment manager in many cases, and of course the participant DFSPs on both sides. All of these rely on that central piece being stable. Without the stability there, then essentially we are nothing. I was a bit shocked when I came to look at this to discover that I've actually been working with Modular for more than 3 years now. It came as a bit of a surprise. I had it in my head it was 2 years or thereabouts. And I can say from my perspective, 2019, when I started working with Modular versus today, it's chalk and cheese in terms of stability. We have made huge strides. Back in 2019, you could deploy a hub, and within about 3 to 4 hours, somebody would have to go along and kick one of the pods to get it to respond, restart it. Sorry, shouldn't use words like kick in this context. And that was kind of frustrating when you were trying to demonstrate it, or when you were just trying to make assessments of the functionality, etc. So compared to today, you can deploy the hub and it will keep running for an extended period of time. I will not make outrageous claims like it is totally stable, but it is far, far better than it was. The core and the infrastructure teams absolutely have to be congratulated in that area. There's going to be a full infrastructure update tomorrow. It's led by Tom Daly and David Fry, and they have each contributed a great deal, as well as the teams that work alongside them. They're going to be talking about two major areas of development in this space. Tom's focusing on Miniloop, which is the limited deployment of a Moduloop hub aimed at essentially early developers, people who are learning about Moduloop, functional testers. And the aim is a quick and easy deployment that can be done to a simple environment to get you up and running quickly. David's going to be talking about infrastructure as code, the IAC, which is the absolute game changer for the full deployments, including ease of deployment and stability of the deployment once it's in place. Within that, we're envisaging 3 levels of deployment. So the sandbox, which is essentially fake money, fake rails, staging, where you have real participants, but again, not real money, and production, which is a full commercial deployment of Moduloop, working with real banks, real MFIs, real mobile wallets, and in a totally stable environment. So they're the focuses of improving stability still further. Just to emphasize the complexity of the stability problem, Moduloop is dependent on lots of other projects or products or whatever you choose to call them. Obviously, Kubernetes, Helm, Docker are the focus of deployments, but you have MySQL right at the bottom, providing all of the ledgers, etc. We have ILP, the interledger protocol. We have tools like Grafana and Locky and Keycloak and numerous OS projects, and they often have interdependencies. One relies on another. And it causes us all sorts of problems with reliability, with stability, etc. And one aspect of this is that we are so focused on the Moduloop core and a lot of the bounded contexts and various other areas of development that we often don't keep up with the latest versions of all of these supporting products. And that brings us one source of instability and also has a significant impact on maintainability. And also, as we've just heard, we're moving into new environments like Azure, which has its own set of dependencies. They're not all alike. Obviously, different environments have different requirements. And I know some decisions are made, for example, in the Azure deployment, which make it substantially different in some key areas to the more usual AWS deployment. Again, more impact on maintainability and stability. As a community, we need to agree which environments will be supported. So at the moment, we're talking about AWS and Azure. We're using various local Linux derivatives and distros, and also not actually necessarily using the cloud at all, but being able to deploy directly into some version of Linux. For each has its own, potentially its own specific, slightly different set of dependencies. And we're going to have to start thinking about budgets around this maintainability. So there needs to be a budget for this, as I've called it, an unglamorous task of adopting the latest stable updates. I mean, we've had at least one occasion recently where a key dependency we found has actually gone out of support, for example, which is not great. We really shouldn't be in that position. I mean, to be out of support, it's normally at least a year, potentially 2 years since the last release, and we really should be moving on to the latest release. And also, we often avoid adopting these latest versions because there is some sort of breaking change in there, which requires changes across various modules within Motion Loop. But unfortunately, we can't avoid it forever, and it does come back to bite us. So we do need some budget in that area. To quickly summarize, we are in a good place. Better than, well, I look back to where we were 3 years ago, and we are so much better. We're probably 90% of where we should be. New environments will impact on this. They'll bring their own stability problems. We need to support the continuing work on Motion Loop, Mini Loop, IAC, extending it and adapting it to new environments. And I know that Tom will be talking about that for Mini Loop and David for IAC. And we do need to start to budget for continuing maintenance for issues arising from external dependencies. It is so easy to focus on the negatives, but I'd emphasize again, we are so much in a better place than we were 3 years ago. We just need to continue that improvement and work by David and his team on the full production environment, and the stability in there has really been transformational. And that's it from me. So thank you, and I'll hand back to you, Simeon.
Thanks so much, Paul. So, excellent. So I just want to give a quick, everyone a quick breather here to highlight the tons of work that has gone into bringing Mojo Loop where we currently are, but also the thinking of what's required for the future. You've heard it from different perspectives, from Steve from the market and deployments perspective, from myself, the community perspective, from Paul, what's required also from the product side. And it is this framing that I'm hoping going into the convening, we can then have meaningful conversations about where do we focus our resources, our limited resources as a community, where do we focus our attention, and what do we need to do in order to support and fit into the current thinking. Now, there's a lot of this stuff that still hasn't been figured out and requires community participation to bring to a proper plan and proper conclusion for a number of these items. These are things that we'll be listening out for, and we're happy to hear, engage and hear any thoughts or have any questions and discussions about them in order to help us get Mojo Loop to a far better place than it is right now, while acknowledging all the awesome work that you all have done and contributed to over the last 3 years.